The title of this piece is, "Why Do These Things Always Happen to Me?" I know that most people have embarrassing moments in their lives, but I'm pretty sure I've had more than my share. I've always wondered about that, and I thought writing about them might help me to understand why these things always happen to me. Maybe it has something to do with karma, and there's a lesson to be learned from all these mortifying moments. I'll never forget the morning I stopped at a café in the Gulf Islands, thinking I had enough time for breakfast before picking up my daughter to go hiking. I finished my muffin, paid the bill, and after 2 cups of coffee, decided to use the washroom before leaving. I noticed that there was no stall surrounding the toilet, and the closest table in the café was in an unfortunate location. If someone forgot to lock the door, and it was opened at the wrong moment, those diners would be treated to the sight of someone sitting on the loo. I made sure to lock the door, but when I was ready to leave, it wouldn't open. The handle refused to turn. I was locked in. Finding myself once more in a potentially embarrassing situation, I was reluctant to call attention to myself, so I decided to quietly wait for someone to try the door and tell the manager, who surely would be able to open it. I leaned against the sink and waited, and waited. At some point, I got tired of standing and sat down on the toilet. I couldn't understand it because most of these people were drinking coffee, so unless they all had the bladders of elephants, someone should have tried to get in. Then it occurred to me that there was another washroom, and both were unisex, so if one was locked, someone would just wait until the other one was free. But didn't anyone notice how long it had been locked? By now, there was probably a line out the door and around the island. I thought about climbing out the window, but it wasn't very big, and I was afraid of getting stuck, half in and half out, and that would have been really embarrassing. I tapped softly on the door, hoping that someone would hear me and quietly inform the manager. When no one came, I knocked louder. With my ear to the door, I could hear the noisy conversation in the busy cafe, but no one seemed to be able to hear me. I knocked again with a little more force, and raising my voice, I said, "Excuse me, I seem to be locked in," but there was no response. Suddenly, I remembered my daughter, who would be wondering where I was. I pictured her worried and desperately searching for her missing mother, only to find me sitting on a toilet in a cafe washroom. I started to wonder if I would ever be found, until archaeologists one day discovered my bones. But even that would be embarrassing because they would think I had died on the toilet. I didn't have a watch, so I had no idea how long I had been in there, but I was getting hungry, and I wondered if I had missed lunch. It was time to get serious. I pounded on the door with my fists and shouted, "Somebody please open this door!" But incredibly, nothing happened. In my frustration, I yelled, "Help!" at the top of my lungs. And in the silence that followed, I realized that everyone in the cafe had finally stopped talking, probably because it sounded like someone was being murdered in the washroom. The manager finally unlocked the door, and I was free at last. I tried to salvage what was left of my dignity and slink out unnoticed, but instead, I was given a rousing round of applause as I fled, scarlet-faced, to my car. I still eat there sometimes when I go to the island, but I refuse to lock the washroom door. Given my history, however, it's probably only a matter of time until someone opens it when I'm sitting on the throne, exposing me to the horrified diners at the nearest table. But I'll take my chances. For some reason, my most embarrassing moments seem to have happened on stage, probably because there were more witnesses. I've acted in dozens of plays over the years, both amateur and professional, and in one, I played a murderer in a psychological thriller called The Chalk Garden. One major scene took place during the dinner hour in a hotel dining room, and the director actually had someone cook a chicken and potatoes for us every night. It was usually pretty good, so on performance nights, that's what I had for dinner. One of the other actors had a long, dramatic speech during the meal, effectively building the tension and suspense, leaving the audience on the edge of their seats. I had timed my lines so I wouldn't talk with my mouth full, and usually I had no trouble responding to cues and reacting appropriately, all while cutting up my chicken breast and eating. On this night, however, it was as tough and leathery as an overcooked pterodactyl, and my knife was so dull it wouldn't have cut jello. I don't know why I didn't just leave it and eat the potatoes. Maybe because I was in character, and the murderer I was playing would certainly have been capable of cutting up her chicken. And I was hungry, so I continued to saw at it, pushing it around on a plate already slippery with mashed potatoes and gravy, trying to be as unobtrusive as possible, and hoping the audience wouldn't notice. It was then, during one of the most emotional, dramatic moments of the play, that my chicken suddenly lifted off my plate and flew through the air in a graceful arc, almost hitting the actor at the next table before coming to rest beside his plate. The director was standing in the wings, and there was just enough time to hear him say, "Don't laugh," before the entire audience exploded. I had been trained never to break character, so I clamped my lips together and held out longer than the rest of the cast, except for the man who was almost hit by my flying chicken. He must have been a master of improv, because he never even cracked a smile as he calmly and politely picked it up, carried it over, and placed it back on my plate. That's when I lost it. For a minute or more, no one could speak, except the director, who kept yelling at us from the wings, ordering us to stop laughing. We tried, but the laughter continued to roll on through the crowd in waves, like an earthquake, with aftershocks still happening, even after we controlled ourselves enough to go on with the play. When the actor who had retrieved my chicken took his bow, he was given a standing ovation. The next night, my dinner was served to me with my chicken already cut up. I felt like a 5-year-old, but at least it stayed on my plate for the rest of the run. I could go on and on, because all these years later, I often still find myself in embarrassing situations, so apparently I haven't yet learned whatever it is that I'm supposed to learn from them. But at least now I can write about them and laugh at myself. Maybe that's the lesson.